in 1967 in the 6 Days War, but Syria still controls a portion of it, and Syria even gained a little bit of it back, if I'm not mistaken, and in the battles and in the so-called civil war that's been taking place in Syria. But you had Trump do that actually now yesterday. You've got a lot of goofy arguments and goofy statements out there, like Mike Pompeo saying that it's possible that Trump could be a Queen Esther, a savior type to Israel. I don't think we ever should have wanted anything else notwithstanding. I don't think it's any president of the United States' job to be a savior to Israel or to the Israeli people. His first duty is to the American people. But that being said, and we continue to see other nations' embassies being moved to Jerusalem, and we continue to see more and more laws and more kind of scuttlebutt and things in the works to try to crack down on, quote, anti-Semitism. Even what I talked about in the last podcast, I saw some headlines saying that some of these yellow vesters, who, again, if you heard it, it's still out there if you haven't heard it. The last one that I did and that I recorded on the yellow vest movement. But that people saying that you have these what they're calling anti-Semites, or this anti-Semitism tone to some within the yellow vest movement. So all of this, when it comes to Israel, when it comes to things being moved to Israel and to Jerusalem in terms of embassies, when it comes to conflict, when it comes to again, just Israel in the news practically every day. That's something that we must keep an eye on. Now, okay, on to the main topic of today, or of this podcast, if you will. Now, we know, obviously, that we had this, needless to say, I think most everyone knows at this point, that we had this investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and 2016 elections. We had, along with that, obviously, an investigation and looking into whether the Trump campaign, either Trump himself or people that were members of his campaign, members of his administration, anybody who aided the campaign in any way whatsoever, whether they worked alongside with and kind of hand in hand with Russia to help that along, whether there was, as they said, collusion. Now, I wasn't keeping track by any means of how long this went on, but I believe they said it was a 22-month period in which Mueller was doing his investigation. And as we know, it was wrapped up here within the last week. A report was delivered to Attorney General William Barr, and William Barr came out with a letter in which I'll be talking a little bit about the letter, but if you keep up on this stuff, which you probably do, number one, if you're listening to me right now, and if not, it's certainly out there, and like I said, I'll be discussing at least part of it as well, regardless. But Attorney General Barr wrote a summary regarding what Mueller had given him from his findings on the investigation. But in terms of, again, the circus, like I said, don't go to the circus. What am I talking about primarily here? What I'm talking about is, you can call it the circus, you can call it a dog and pony show, in which you have both political parties that alternate. Matter of fact, that's going to be a good place to actually start here, I suppose, as I'm going down this road. You'll have someone who comes under investigation, or you'll have a hearing, or you'll have a controversy or a scandal, and you'll have one party that seems, one of the two parties that seems highly interested, highly concerned, that we need to do an investigation, that we need to have a hearing, that we need to get to the bottom of this. And you see him preening and posturing and looking all dramatic for the cameras on C-SPAN and wherever else, other media outlets. And when it's all said and done, almost no one of any real significance is found guilty of anything or much of anything. Almost no one of any real significance or power is held accountable. And when it's all said and done, indeed, it seems like a gigantic waste of time and a waste of, as people said with the Mueller investigation. I saw somebody who I went to high school with say that it was a waste of taxpayer money and a waste of time. Well, we just had investigations, more than one investigation before that, into Hillary Clinton when it came to Benghazi, into Hillary Clinton when it came to her emails, to her email server, and handling and mishandling of classified information, and into Hillary Clinton and perhaps Bill to an extent when it came to the Clinton Foundation. And ultimately, what penalty did she pay other than, you might say, losing an election? But what legal penalty did she pay? I mean, the chance of lock her up. Is Hillary locked up? Absolutely not. We know she's not. She's walking around completely free, sometimes still complaining about having lost the election and making excuses for it. Sorry, you may have heard that. I was scrolling down in a little bit of video that I didn't necessarily want to or need to include here. Lindsey Graham talking. But again, the whole point being both parties alternate. What happens is one party, as I mentioned, even to my dad, who I'm Facebook friends with on my own timeline today, we get one party that does an investigation, while the other party screams, witch hunt, witch hunt, witch hunt, and talks about a waste of time, and all it is politically motivated, and all it is again, a waste of taxpayer money, a waste of our time. And then, once that investigation is wrapped up, then the other party gets started and wants to open and investigate. The very party and the very people who were complaining want to open an investigation into somebody else. And it's very interesting. I think Lindsey Graham is pretty much a joke, a very conflicted individual, as quite honestly most of them are in Congress and in Washington, D.C. Very double-minded, you might even say, to use a little bit of a scriptural reference. But it's almost like it was kind of surreal in that I could almost say you could have had a debate, Lindsey Graham debating Lindsey Graham, perhaps in the very same day, because I heard a soundbite in which Lindsey Graham was saying that the Democrats would be wise not to try to push this any further, to not ask for any further investigations, and we know that they've asked for the Mueller report to be released in full. We know that Mitch McConnell is blocking that, or has blocked that to this point. That was news that came out today as well. But you had Lindsey Graham saying that the Democrats better be careful, because he was in Congress when there was the impeachment of Bill Clinton, and he said the Republicans received a political blowback, some loss of political capital, some negative effects in the voting booth from impeaching Bill Clinton. And again, I would say we must always use common sense. We must always use discernment. Why would Lindsey Graham or why would the Republicans even care whether or not the Democrats hurt themselves? Naturally, they wouldn't. But anyway, he talks about how they need to be careful, And then Lindsey Graham, pretty much debating Lindsey Graham, the two sides of Lindsey Graham, he wants to open up all of these new investigations that aren't even necessarily new investigations. From thehill.com, Graham wants to probe Obama-era controversies. Lindsey Graham saying that he wants to probe a myriad of Obama-era scandals, including the handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation, now that Special Counsel Mueller's probe is complete. And this keeps scrolling on me all funky and everything. I'm just going to try to X this particular thing out. Graham also said the Senate Judiciary Committee should look into a controversial opposition research dossier on President Trump. By the way, there was a story, too. You know who suggested or encouraged John McCain? It was after the election. It was after Trump won. But you know who encouraged John McCain to turn the dossier into the FBI to begin with? Lindsey Graham. So again, Lindsey Graham versus Lindsey Graham. It's kind of entertaining in a way, but he says when it comes to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA warrant, the Clinton campaign, the counterintelligence investigation has pretty much been swept under the rug. Those days are over, Graham told reporters during a press conference. Lindsey Graham, who has so much influence and so much impact, and I hate to turn into Donald Trump here, but he basically got pretty much almost literally 0% of support or the vote when he actually ran for president. But he can try to be tough, I guess. I don't think anybody really believes him. He added that the FBI's handling of the probe into Clinton's use of a private email server while Secretary of State was, quote, bizarre at best and troubling to its core from my point of view. Graham's comments indicate that Senate Republicans are ready to move on from the years-long probe into the Trump campaign and Russia's election interference after Mueller handed over his report to the Justice Department on Friday. He said he wants Barr to testify before the Judiciary Committee, but indicated that his focus as chairman will be to dig into the handling of Clinton's emails, the Carter Page FISA warrant application, and the origin of the controversial opposition research dossier compiled against then-candidate Trump by Christopher Steele, a former British agent. Graham also raised a controversial meeting between then Attorney General Loretta Lynch and former President Clinton in 2016 that sparked outrage and accusations of coordination amid the Justice Department's probe into Hillary Clinton's email server. I believe there was more there, and I intend to get to there, Graham said. He also intends to ask Barr to appoint a special counsel to look into the same areas. What I want to do is see if he'll appoint a special counsel. I'd like to find somebody like a Mr. Mueller. So Lindsey Graham apparently wants another 22-month or however long period investigation into, and again, do I believe that Hillary Clinton walked away scot-free? And when I was more partisan myself, would I have been with Lindsey Graham? I don't know if I would have ever been with Lindsey Graham, but I would have agreed with some of this. But essentially, Lindsey Graham wants to start a whole new round of investigations, special counsel's investigations and probes into things that have already been investigated. And we can say, again, that these people got away with it in many cases. They probably did, but that's the point. And that's why it is a circus. That's why it is a dog and pony show, because people with power, people with influence, politically speaking in particular, tend to get away with almost everything. You know, and it's very interesting as well, as you had, and by the way, I'll post this actually I have it up here, from Axios. Lindsey Graham urged McCain to give Trump-Russia dossier to FBI. And that's, again, a story that's made its way through various outlets, I'm sure. But it's very interesting, even. First of all, I got about 15, 16 minutes here, and hopefully I'll be able to wrap this up while still hitting on most of what I want to hit on. But first of all, I want to get into kind of the letter itself, Barr's letter, and then I want to get into Barr, some of the troubling aspects to Barr. And it's not a smear campaign.